So nice to have everyone together as a community. Hmm. I hope you're enjoying your retreat so far. It's nice to have this time out from our busy lives, just taking it easy. Not much to do, just walking, sitting, eating, sleeping. Hmm. Nice, simple life. In the introductory talk, I read a bit of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, um, the discourse from the Buddha on setting the wheel of Dharma in motion. And this was the first talk given by the Buddha. So we'll take that talk tonight and we'll kind of break it down a little bit further. And I've kind of dug a few rabbit holes for myself that I could go down. So I've got to be very careful so that I stay in the right direction here. Mm. Um, so the Buddha in his life started to come to understand that there was a problem he called dukkha. Dukkha, this suffering, and he left his lay life and went into homelessness as a wandering beggar to try to develop an understanding of that. And in his wanderings, said that he tried quite deep concentration practices. There's different interpretations of what this means, but to me, it means the practice of using the power of your mind or power of concentration developed in meditation to block things out, to push them away. Yeah. And the reason I'm setting this up is because we're going to come to the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, where the Buddha talks about the middle way, the middle path. So we need to understand this background to understand what he's talking about. Mm. Even though he attained the highest level in those concentration practices, dukkha didn't come to an end. Maybe you've experienced that yourself. You can develop a lot of concentration in meditation, but when the suppression of your mind starts to fall away, yeah, of that concentration, everything comes up. And we can see that when we come out of retreat and samadhi starts to decay. We come to the end of retreat and we go, oh, it's going to be like this forever. And then we come back into normal life and we find that the whole thing falls apart. Now, when I'm using the word concentration, I'm not even talking about what the Buddha meant by samadhi. So a mind unified around the awakening factors. We're just talking the power of pure concentration and the blissful states that can come from that. Then he wandered some more and he made friends with 5 ascetics, and their practices were ascetic practices of self-mortification. And apparently the Buddha settled on self-starvation, practiced that for many years until he nearly died. In the suttas, he talks about, so his practice was like eating a very small amount of rice each day. And he talks about sticking his finger in his belly button and being able to count the vertebrae on his spine. So that thin. And so you'll see Buddha statues around where the Buddha is very emancipated, where he's just skin and bones. And this comes from this ascetic phase. Hmm. When the Buddha nearly died, he was kind of lost. And a young girl apparently mistook him for a deity or a spirit sitting under a tree, and she gave offerings, and he ate those offerings. And in eating those offerings, he broke his ascetic practices and his friends left. Yeah. They kind of saw him as abandoning the way because he started eating food. So he took food. By this time, the Buddha would have been in despair. He's actually nearly died. He's done everything he could try. These two, if one thing doesn't work, well, then obviously the opposite will. And that's what we do in our practice, isn't it? If too much effort doesn't work, then maybe no effort will work. And we go from restlessness to dullness and so on. I can see some smiles there. Yeah, so we go to the extremes. It was that led the Buddha by himself with no friends. He had left all his teachers. He came to a Bodhi tree and then he made that famous determination to sit under the tree until he solved the problem. Still some asceticism in him. Yeah. And by the morning, he was awakened Buddha. And then he wandered apparently for a few months, experiencing the bliss of his liberation. And he thought, there's nobody I could teach. Nobody would actually get this. Um, he was saying this Dharma is subtle, difficult to see, difficult to understand, difficult to comprehend. I can't remember the exact words. He was saying for people that are, inclined towards attachment, with tendencies towards attachment, they could never understand this. Yeah. Like I point to, it's hard to understand that there's pleasure in giving things up and not getting them, not getting what we want. Yeah. And then apparently one of the gods came down from the heaven and said to him, there are some beings with a little dust in their eyes, just a little, maybe they'll understand. And that was what motivated him to teach. So he thought of his original concentration practice teachers and they died, passed away. And then he thought of those 5 ascetics. And so he set off to find them. And that's what leads to the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. Mm. From the Sutta, it says it was at Deer Park in Isipatana near Varanasi. When he arrived there, the 5 ascetics saw him and they didn't want anything to do with him. So the Buddha was still had that problem. Had no friends, nobody who believed in. And here was this young man, because he was a young man then, was it 36? Is that right? Am I right? I was trying to, yeah. And 36 years old, eating well, or not well by our standards, but well by an ascetic standards, glowing, radiant, looking healthy. And he's come up to them and he's say, hey, I've done it. I'm an awakened Buddha. Yeah. And they've looked at him and go, nah. And apparently he had to say it 3 times because they kept saying, no, just go away. And the 3rd time he's basically said, look, you know me. I'm not a stranger to you. We practiced together for a long time. Did I ever make this declaration before? Have I ever lied to you? And it's like, well, no, and I'm telling the truth now. So the Buddha and these 5 ascetics, they sat down and the Buddha gave his first teaching, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. And so when we read this sutta, it's important to understand that the Buddha is actually talking to 5 ascetics who use self-mortification, self-control, the development of power, the same way that we might develop power in ourselves by controlling our food, controlling how we look, all these sorts of things we try to develop power, or by controlling others. Yeah. So controlling their mind, crushing their mind. The Buddha used an image of when he was in his ascetic practices of a strong man pushing a weak man into the ground. And that's how he said, I crush mind with mind. Yeah, like a strong man pushing a weaker man into the ground and struggling, so hard that sweat was running from him, with teeth clenched, that's right, and sweat running from his armpits. That much effort. Has anyone other than me put that much effort in their meditation practice? I did years of it. I was really good at putting lots of effort in. Yeah. So they sat down. So this is this here. Now they don't believe him yet, but they do trust him. And so he's talking to ascetics. So this is where we see with the suttas that the Buddha adjusts the way that he frames the Dharma dependent on who he's having a discussion with. That's really, really important. He's extremely sensitive to who he's having a discussion with. Okay, so it's in the Samyutta Nikaya, number 56. So Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, setting the wheel of Dharma in motion. And we're going to talk about the wheel tonight. This is how I heard it. It starts off, I read the whole thing yet last night, so I'll just go through this like this. They begin like, this is how I heard it, because it's an oral tradition. So these suttas, these discourses are discussions that were kind of turned into songs and then handed down. So they memorize them. And there's some suttas where the Buddha literally says, you will remember this. Yeah, the Honeyball Sutta, Madhupindika Sutta. Actually, I think it I think it was Ananda said, what shall we call this? And it was the Madhupindika Sutta. Yeah, and he said, well, this is what we call it. You will remember this. In other words, you will compress this up. You will recite this. You will pass this on. So they started to do that. Yeah. Okay. So oral tradition, it was passed down orally because things that are written down, especially on banana leaves or papyrus grass or something like that, decay and rot. Yeah. So if you're passing it down, if you wrote something down, it could be lost. But if you remember it, and especially as a song, and you chant or sing it in community, then if something is wrong with that song, something is out, it's noticed. And in the traditional owners of this country we call Australia, the Indigenous people have song lines and they sing the land that they're in. And we could really go into that. It's absolutely amazing. They sing the plants, they sing the birds, they sing the land, its management. Everything you need to know to survive is in these songs that have been handed down for 60,000 plus years and continues to add on and maps out the ancestors and lineages. It's amazing. Anyway, this is how I heard it. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living in the deer park at Isipatana, near Varanasi. There he addressed a group of 5 bhikkhus thus. It's important to note that there's no bhikkhus yet. There's no bhikkhus, even though it's translated like this. These are 5 ascetics, and the Buddha, there's no bhikkhus, there's no Buddhism yet. It's just starting. This is the very beginning, the first seed. Bhikkhus, these 2 extremes should be avoided by one who has gone forth into homelessness. What are the 2? The pursuit of sensual happiness based on sensual pleasures, which is inferior, coarse, the way of ordinary people, lacking in refinement and not useful. And the practice of self-exhaustion, which is painful, lacking in refinement and not useful. Avoiding these two extremes, the Tathagata is awakened to the middle way that gives rise to seeing and understanding, leads to calming and direct knowledge, to full awakening, nibbana. Okay. So if we take a look at this part of the sutta here, what's going on? So there's the there's the Buddha. Yeah, there's the 5 bhikkhus. And the Buddha is giving this first teaching. And it must have been going, how do I teach this? How do I describe this? So he started out by talking about extremes. Yeah, this is important. Can you see? He's talking about extremes. He's talking to ascetics. Now, where does an ascetic sit in an extreme of effort, an extreme of striving and struggling? Yeah. So he says there's 2 extremes. That one who has gone forth into homelessness. So they're homeless, they're beggars. And the Buddha's also a beggar. They don't have a home. Everything they have on them, their robes, their begging bowl, is all that they own. That's it. Wherever they go, their home is with them. If they sit under a tree, that's their home. They go into town, that's their home. Yeah, there's nothing to go back to. There's nothing to worry about. There's nothing to cling to. Yeah. But there is a trust, a faith, a confidence that they'll get fed. If you tried to do it in Australia, it wouldn't work. You you wouldn't get fed. Yeah. But fortunately, it was in a society where there's merit in feeding, in helping those on spiritual paths. Yeah. Okay, the 2 extremes. These 2 extremes should be avoided by one who's gone forth into homelessness. What are the 2? The pursuit of sensual happiness based on sensual pleasures. So what would that mean? What's a sensual pleasure? Has anybody enjoyed a good sight? Or maybe a nice sound? Or a smell? Or a taste? Or a nice feeling in their body? Have we got any intellectuals here? Have you enjoyed a good thought, a good problem? A nice puzzle to work out? A nice worry to sort? A nice desire of possibilities? If only. Yeah. So he's talking about this attempt to extract pleasure from sensory experience. And so when Buddha's talking about the senses, it's not just the 5 physical senses, it's also the mind as a sense as well. This is important to note. The mind is also a sense. So the mind is sensitive to the 5 physical senses, but the mind also creates its own sensory information. It creates its own sights, its own sounds, its own smells, its own tastes, its own feelings within the body that don't exist in the world. And it's our job, or I see it as our job as insight meditators, to be able to separate and see the difference between sensory information coming from the world and sensory information created by your mind. Yeah? Start to really look into that. In your body now, how much of that bodily experience is mental and how much is it from the world touching you? Yeah? Take a look at that. If you've ever experienced relaxation, that feeling of relaxation is mental. Nobody else can see it. A doctor can't find it. It's not from the world. Emotions are mental. They don't exist. They're mind-created experiences. Yeah? Lots of experiences in our body are mind created. Notice how your body feels changes depending on what's happening in your meditation. Notice how the experience of your body changes depending on what's happening within your mind, the type of thought you have, the type of effort you're putting in, so on. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. Can you separate mind from body, nama rupa? Can you separate it out? Or does the mind created experiences feel very real? I encourage you to do an investigation um, in your future sits. Whenever thinking comes up in your mind, and I know this is a rare occasion, it will come up occasionally, right? But when a thought comes up, ask yourself, do I see this thought? Is it a sight? Yeah, is it an image or is it a movie? Do I hear this thought? Is it a sound, a voice in your head? Do I smell this thought? Yes, you can smell thoughts. Do I taste this thought or do I feel this thought in my body? The mind uses a combination of the five physical senses to create the experience of thinking. Thoughts communicate or arise within us, and the communication happens through the mind stimulating the five physical senses. If there were no five physical senses, then your mind could not produce thoughts. Is this true? Am I just leading you down some strange path? Why don't you investigate and find out? Not what you're thinking about, but how do you actually experience thinking? Yeah, take a look at that. Okay. So, sensual happiness based on sensual pleasures. Why is sensual happiness based on sensual pleasures something to be avoided? Well, the Buddha says that it's inferior, coarse, the way of ordinary people, and lacking refinement and not useful. So that's really good praise for sensual pleasure, isn't it? If somebody was trying to say, I've got something and I'm going to sell you a car, and I say, this car is inferior, it's coarse, it's what ordinary people drive, it's lacking refinement, and it's not very useful. Would you say, give me two? Is that what you would say? So this is the way the Buddha's talking about sensual pleasure. So pleasure of the senses. Why? Well, I've investigated that myself, and pleasure from the senses is actually quite nice at times. I could see a nice sunset, or I could taste some nice food, or listen to some music, or listen to the waves down the beach, or just feel the air on my skin. It's quite nice. What is it about it that the Buddha tells us to be cautious, or telling the bhikkhus to be cautious about the ascetics? It's that sensual pleasure is anicca and anatta. Anicca as in impermanent, and therefore if something is impermanent, you cannot rely upon it for your happiness. Yeah? And anatta means not self, but it literally means it happens by itself. You are not doing it. It's got nothing to do with you. Yeah. And so far on your retreat, you would have noticed that a lot of things come and go, that experiences change. Yeah. And that you're not doing it. It's doing itself. Thoughts come and go by themselves. Experiences in the body come and go. Meditation experiences come and go. All these things just come and go. So if we have something that is impermanent and not under our control, and we expect it to be a certain way, or we try to get pleasure from it, because of its impermanence and uncontrollability and unreliability, we have to apply our attention to it again and again and again to extract that pleasure. So if you've got some fantasy thought that comes up in your head, you have to apply your attention again and again. You have to think it again and again and again and again to get that pleasure from it. Or you have to think that angry thought again and again and again to get that pleasure of feeling right and justified. Yeah. You have to see that sight again and again. Once you've seen it, it's gone. Yeah. Once you smell it, it's gone. Hear it, it's gone. Taste it, it's gone. Experience that pleasure in your body, it's gone. So what we're learning to do as insight meditators is seeing the unsatisfactory nature of trying to extract some sort of pleasure or some sort of satisfaction out of these things. But it doesn't mean that we don't experience them. Can you see a beautiful sunset and have no urge whatsoever to take a photo of it and keep it? Try to trap it. Trap it so I can get it again later. Linda. Yeah. Can you? Can you do that? Or can you just experience it and just let it go, let it be? Let it fade. If I'm clinging to that sunset, I'm missing what's here right now. That sunset is now the past. And what's happening right now is brand new. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. Can I experience that? Then let that go. Can I experience this now? Let go. It's flowing. It's changing. I'm pointing you towards something here. So I think you agree with the Buddha, if you look out in society, that trying to get pleasure from sensory experience is the way of ordinary people. Not ordinary as an insult, but it's pretty normal. It's pretty ordinary, isn't it? If you want to be a noble one, you have no interest in things like that. But just observe that in yourself when your mind grabs onto something and goes, this is it. Even in your meditation, oh, I had a really pleasurable experience. I got to get back to that. Well, you can't get back to it. Why? Because it doesn't exist. It was mind created in the first place. That lofty meditative experience you had, that jhana, that absorption, that bliss, it was mind created, so it didn't exist in the first place. And you're trying to get back to something that doesn't exist now because it's gone. The conditions have changed. It's no longer there. That's the trap of meditators, trying to get back to things. It's like watching a flowing river, seeing a part of that flowing river that you like and keep coming down to the river trying to find that particular flow which no longer exists anymore. You can never get back to it ever. You can create the conditions for something else to arise in your practice, but you can never get back to what you're trying to get back to again. If you try, you will get dukkha, suffering. Yeah. And the practice of self-exhaustion. So the practice of self-exhaustion, these ascetics would understand, wouldn't they? Has anyone ever practiced self-exhaustion in their life? So bringing control in your life, trying to control your mind, control your body, or control the environment, the world, family, friends, everything around. Yeah? Have we all been there? Yeah? I think we have. Yeah. And the practice of self-exhaustion, which is painful It's definitely painful, lacking in refinement and not useful. Now, notice he's mapped out these two extremes. The pursuit of sensual happiness based on sensual pleasures. These five ascetics already know that this doesn't work. If they didn't know, they wouldn't be ascetics. They've already left the normal life. They've gone out wearing rags. Some ascetics wear bark on their skin because it's itchy. All sorts of things. They've gone to become uncomfortable. Yeah, they've gone out and given everything up, so they know that. But this is brand new for them to hear that the practice of self-exhaustion, the ascetic practices are also painful, lacking refinement, and not useful. That's strange to them because they think that if I'm addicted to, that's what I meant to say with impermanent, something that's impermanent, it develops addiction because of the repeated action. We become addicted to everything in the sensory world. And so they know that. And so they've gone away from that. And they think, well, the opposite to that must go. You know, if I, if I'm eating too much cake, well, then obviously the opposite way is to have no cake at all. Go to that other extreme. We jump from one extreme to the other. So the Buddha said, avoiding these extremes, the Tathagata, so someone who lives in a state of just this, just this. So being with this and letting everything else you're experiencing now, as soon as you experience, have you noticed, and this is another curiosity, bring curiosity in your practice. Just notice now, there's an experience of just sitting in the room and sitting in as a community here too. Experience of the sounds in the room, your body, your mind. That's kind of just flowing and just dropping away. Drop, 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 drop. You feel it dropping away. And as soon as you're aware of any experience, it's already gone. You can't actually be mindful of anything. You can only be mindful of the memory of what you were just aware of. That's why sati, mindfulness, is memory or remembering the flow of experience. As soon as you're mindful of it, it's already gone. Can you rest on that? Can you let it drop? It's actually quite freeing. You see that. Avoiding these extremes, the Tathagata, I love that word, has awakened to the middle way. So what the Buddha awakened to was the middle way, the middle path. From what I've experienced, the middle way or the middle path isn't a place, isn't cutting these in half. It's something that flows and changes depending on the situation, depending on what's happening now. It's like a dance. It's a refined dance. When it's there, when it's really there, this dance becomes effortless. And you'll see this appear in your practice. Your practice will suddenly become, when your mind has developed a lot of contentment and moving into equanimity, suddenly it will shift into effortlessness. Is effortless letting go. You can even see that in the development of samatha, become refined with your object, and then suddenly it flows, the mind shifts from effort to apply your attention to effortlessness. It just flows with the breath. Yeah, if you've experienced that. Mm. The middle way that gives rise. So the middle way, we're talking about finding something that is based on a heightened sensitivity to effort. And for me, it actually sits just, mentioned someone before, it sits just above falling asleep. So relaxed you're about to fall asleep, but with clear comprehension. So you're very clearly alert and aware. So no restlessness, no dullness. Yeah. It's very, very relaxed. But the mindfulness needs that sampajanya, that clear comprehension with it. That's something to play around with. Can you clearly comprehend the flow of all experience now? Just sitting, just observing it, enjoying the show. There's a movie playing. If you're off thinking about something, you're missing it. Don't think during the movie. Just sit here and enjoy the movie, enjoy the flow, the change. It's beautiful. Yeah. As awakened to the middle way that gives rise to seeing and understanding, so that seeing and understanding, the clear seeing, the clear comprehension and understanding leads to calming and direct knowledge to full awakening nibbana. Mm. When we're talking about nibbana, it can be a difficult one to describe. Don't try to intellectualize this, but we can. The Buddha did use analogies, and we can use analogy. Mm. Patrick Carney um, used a wonderful analogy of fire, and the Buddha used analogies of fire all the time. So when we're talking about nibbana, we're talking about the going out of fire. So think of the extinguishing of fire, but this fire is craving. But to understand this and understand this as an experience for yourself, we first need to understand a fire. So think of about a fire. A fire has certain characteristics. A fire is hot, it's agitated, and it's restless. We love watching fires, don't we? Because it entertains the mind. It's so agitated and restless. So the fire is flickering around, and it's agitated, and it's hot, and it's flickering. Yeah. So it has that characteristic of restlessness, of ongoing, of producing heat, yeah, of burning up. And if we look at the fire has characteristics. We can determine a fire by the type of fuel that the fire consumes. So forest fire, oil fire, wood fire, coal fire. So a fire is defined by its fuel, yeah, the fuel that it burns, yeah. A fire also clings to its fuel. A fire clings or grasps onto its fuel, it won't let it go. So it's flickering and burning, but on its fuel, yeah. So it clings to its fuel. A fire is also located and defined by its fuel. Where the fuel is, the fire is. Yeah? The fire cannot move away from the fuel. The fire needs the fuel to exist. Yeah? You get that imagery? Yeah. Think of your obsessions. Has anyone ever been obsessed with anything? I did once when I was 4 years old, but that was it. Yeah. Am I telling the truth? Is that breaking, Scylla? Yeah. Yeah, obsession. I was obsessed with Linda. There you go. When I was 4. Yeah, and it took you till I was like 20 for you to turn up. But I was obsessed with Linda when I was 4. Okay. Linda's my wife, by the way. It's not a student, that's my wife. We've been together 38 years. There's no scandal here. Okay. So if we look at that, look at your obsessions. If we look at our obsessions, when we're obsessed with something, our mind is agitated and hot and it's restless. And we cling to the obsession. The mind clings to the obsession. It grabs to it, it grasps onto it. And it's located, we're defined and located by what we obsess about. Those obsessions, that clinging to those obsessions defines who we are. It creates who we are. Yeah? We are the total of all our obsessions. That's what we are. If you want to look at your personality, look at your personality and what it's actually built up by. So, what would it be like to put out that fire? Or how would you put out that fire? You try to stomp on it and jump up and down. But what if we removed the fuel that the fire depended on? What if we understood and removed the fuel that our obsessions are clinging to? That craving, yeah? And once we remove that fuel, then the fire of the obsessions, the fire of the craving goes out. What's left when that fire of our obsessions, the fire of the craving goes out? And that's the best I can do to point towards nirvana. Yeah. So what if that craving for seeing and hearing and smelling and tasting, yeah, and experiencing through your body and thinking and remembering and judging and learning, and what if that went out? And we're not talking about indifference here. We're not talking about detachment or something cold here. We're talking about fully embracing experience, but without the clinging, without the craving. Yeah. Without any desire for it to be any other way than how it already is. Now we're talking about equanimity. Yeah. Complete removal of the sorting mechanism of our mind. Yeah. Mm. And what is the middle way that gives rise to seeing and understanding, leads to calming direct knowledge, to full awakening nirvana? It's this very noble eightfold path: right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right unification. And then the Buddha goes on to talk about the Four Noble Truths. And of course, the fourth noble truth is the Noble Eightfold Path. So, like I said, I could go down a really big rabbit hole here. We'll leave the Noble Eightfold Path for another night because that's a full night's Dharma talk. Okay. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up. I don't know how we're going to do this with so many people, but open this up to questions. So, you can use one of those little wavy hands or something like that if anyone's got any questions about this sutta, or maybe questions about your practice at all. My eyes are too blurry to actually read. Oh, is mental sound a delusion? Okay, let's take a look at delusion. That's a really good question. Yeah, thank you, Linda. Is mental sound a delusion? Okay, so when we define delusion, we can define it as two parts, or we can notice it as two ways in our meditation practice. There's a delusion as in our perception is misaligned and we're misseeing things. We're not seeing things how they actually are. So we can be caught within a delusion. Yeah. We can be caught within some fantasy about how things within our mind and living within as if that fantasy is real. Yeah. But when we're talking about there's another type of delusion, one that you'll see really clearly in your meditation practice. Has anyone ever forgotten what they were doing during meditation? Have you been sitting there in meditation, you're mindful of your meditation object, and then suddenly you realize, oh, I've been off for however long, lost in a thought or something like that. That gap between knowing what's happening now, forgetting it, and then suddenly the mind remembering that you were off. Yeah? Remembering that your mind had wandered. That gap is what I call habitual delusion. So a state of not knowing when we lose awareness of awareness. That's a really good meditation object to take for Vipassana insight. See if you can notice or take real interest in those gaps of remembering. And you'll see that in daily life. You'll walk down the hallway and you'll for a while, completely forget you're walking down the hallway. You'll drive a car and you'll drive through a stop sign or a school zone and not even notice it because you're caught up in some thought. So is a mental sound a delusion? No. A mental sound is just a sound created by the mind. Yeah. Delusion is something else. Delusion is a state of not knowing. Yeah. And this state of not knowing can be clearly seen within your meditation practice. Yeah. Wonderful. Has anyone else got any questions or anything that